Could someone on Zoom talk like someone who's not me?
Test, test,
Hello.
Yeah,
test.
okay. I
Hello.
Is this coming through to the stream? I'm seeing something suggesting that like everyone else's audio is not streaming, and I have no way to change that. Let's see. Uh, I'll try this. Okay, Christine says yes. Can someone who's not me just say something again?
Good
Testing.
morning, Ethereum.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, we'll go. So cool. Hey everyone, this is consensus layer call 135. I'll grab the issue here for the agenda and we'll just go ahead and get started. So first off, there's just a few announcements. The first one is about kurtosis. If Barnabas is on the call, I think he can give us some more details there. I thought I saw him somewhere.
Hey, yeah, I
Oh,
can
okay.
do. So we wanted to just announce that we're taking a more active maintainer role in the Cortosis ecosystem slash Ethereum package in general. And one of the steps is that we've done a migration from for the Ethereum package itself. So it's moving from Cortosis Tech organization to ETH Panda Ops. You can find the redirect URL and a few other instructions on what might break in Twitter or in the Kurtosis Discord. But if you wish to continue using the old setup, you can always clone the last release and continue using that. But in case you want to keep up with future changes, then please update your URLs and target the latest release onwards. So 4.0 onwards would be maintained mainly by ETH Panda Ops.
Okay, great. Next up, Tim, I think had an announcement around adding some nuance to CFI in the IP process. Tim, if you just wanted to give a quick shout out.
Yeah, so we discussed this on the last ACDE, but there was a proposal that came out of Kenya that was to basically improve how we define CFI and also add a formal way for the community to propose the IPs to hard forks, and then just rename included to scheduled for inclusion before stuff ships, because we sometimes remove some stuff that's been marked as included. So if people want to review this async, that'd be great. And then hopefully by the next ACDE in like about a week, we can just move forward with some version of this as official.
Cool, thanks. So next up is Electra. And I think the next step that is on everyone's mind is going to be Devnet 1. There's a spec floating around for the EL set of EIPs. I don't have that handy right now, but we can discuss the CL set of specs. And that's generally going to be the Alpha 3 release. So I just dropped a link in the chat here. And I think it's pretty ready to go. Shout out to Xiaowei for assembling all of this. There was one open question, I think, on this PR 3768. Before we get into that, is there anything else around DevNet 1 that people would like to discuss? Is this more like higher level, or should we turn to just these few open questions for the specs? Okay, so right, let me grab the link. Let's see, it's this one. Okay, so 3786. This PR is really just changing the layout of the fields in the new attestation type that we have, and it looks pretty simple. there's some implications just around how SSC works and how these things are laid out. So that was kind of, I think, the original motivation was to not break essentially these indices that come out of the Merkleization. Yeah, and so this PR suggests moving this field basically to the end. The way it works is like appending things is much nicer than putting stuff in the middle in terms of the layouts. Yeah, so it looks like there's been quite a few approvals on the PR. Does anyone have any comments about this? I think I do, at least, just because we do have this pattern that the signature of a thing comes after everything else, and this kind of breaks the pattern, so it feels at least aesthetically wrong to me. But yeah, no one else has really chimed in otherwise. So if there are any comments here, now would be the time to walk through them. Otherwise, I suppose we can just go ahead and merge this. Yeah, Cayman.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, so if we do end up approving like a stable container EIPs, if like in the future, it's like stable containers kind of require us to append only. So in this case, this is not a stable container, it's just a normal container, but that's just something to keep in mind that like even if it's something that has a signature, kind of by the rules of the EIP that we're setting forward, we would still be appending in that case.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. Yeah. Anyone else have any feedback on this PR? It sounds like I might be in the minority on the field ordering, so I will defer to everyone else in that case.
Like you mentioned the pattern of signature lost. I'm not sure if that's still the case. Like the way how it's done now is that there is this envelope that has like the payload and the signature, and it's just these two things combined. And the only thing that keeps changing is the payload, right? So it's a bit weird in the attestation because the signature is actually not signing over all the fields. It's only signing over the attestation data, but it's not signing over aggregation bits and committee bits. So I'm just wondering if this pattern that you mentioned, like where is it actually being used, like the signature loss?
Like everywhere. Like, is there an SSZ type we have where you don't have like a bunch of stuff and then the signature? Like, I don't think there's any, like, I guess that's my point here is like this would be breaking the pattern and it is arguably just aesthetic. So again, this is not the end of the world, but it definitely sticks out to me. Casey was asking, why do we put the signature last originally? And I think it was, again, more just sort of like an aesthetic thing. Justin has a comment. Typically, RLP, you need to read the data that is signed over. Right. Yeah. So, yeah, you could, if you're doing some like streaming SSZ thing, then yeah, you could kind of argue that it's helpful for that. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really just a pattern that we kind of settled on. And I also don't think we've broken yet. But yeah, that being said, I think we should ship Devnet 1. So unless there's any other objections, we can go ahead and merge this after the call.
Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand in Zoom, but I think this is not something that we can do without breaking things. But what if we had attestation data, signature, aggregation bits, and committee bits? That way, signature would come after the stuff we are signing, and then we'll have the rest of things.
It would also be fine, but we should only do that if we adopt a stable container, because right now, like aggregation bits is generalized index 4, data is 5, signature is 6, and committee bits is 7. So 4, 5, and 6, like this PR, what it achieves is that 4, 5, and 6 stay the same. So aggregation bits is still 4, data is still 5, signature is still 6. If we adopt a stable container, then these indices break anyway. So we can use that as an additional reordering. But yeah, I mean, it would make sense to put the aggregation bits after the signature because they are not being signed over anyway.
So it's safe to say that we can go for it, and then if stable container become a real thing, we can think about reordering the last time.
Yes, like if we adopt stable container, we can reorder everything because like the proofs break.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Sounds like at least on the call we have support for the PR as is. So yeah, let's ship it. Okay, I think that was the big thing left on the specs release. Is there anything else that we should discuss right now? Otherwise, the plan I think is to get a release out later today or tomorrow, and have that be Devnet 1. I think there was something in the chat. Okay, Perry linked something here in the execution APIs. Let's see. Okay. Maybe can someone from the EL speak to EL consolidations being ready to go for DevNet 1? No one knows. I think that Mikhail is, yeah, either Mikhail or like client working on that, and I think they're both out this week. So, okay, we can follow up on that one after the call. And otherwise, yeah, I think we are in a good place for DevNet 1 with the CL specs. Next up, I wanted to touch on timing. If any CL team is here, have you started implementation on this release? Do you have any sense of like DevNet 1 timing? I think it'd be helpful for everyone to kind of start coordinating on what time we could see the DevNet up.
Yeah, I can speak for Teku. We are okay. We are waiting for the attestation field to the end to be merged, but we have the PR already prepared and ready for merge. And the other thing that we are waiting for is this 3783. We haven't started doing anything there, but it's supposed to be not that. So as soon as we have that merged, I think we're kind of safe to having client ready in days.
Okay.
For lots, we will basically integrate consolidations as the spec gets finalized, and then I think with small amount of changes, we should be ready for DevNet 1.
For Lighthouse, I haven't really gone through the new spec changes, but I think we should be in good shape for DevNet 1.
Right. So is everyone thinking like weeks or? mini weeks. Or we don't know. It's fine if we don't know. But people have been asking.
I mean, if spec is sort of finalized, then by end of next week.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so from Grandina side, we also didn't look for the latest changes in the spec, and we're actually waiting until it's fully finalized. But the rough estimate something like a week or two for us, a week or two after the spec is finalized.
Yeah, we would like to have a reference test to run against consolidation stuff. So code is there, but yeah, once we got some reference tests to run everything over, we get some more confident. But yeah, we are kind of in the next week-ish.
Okay, great. James, I think I saw you on mute. I don't know if you're going to give a Prism update.
Yeah, we have a couple PRs still waiting. I think just like everyone else, probably like a week or two. We'll need to reform a new DevNet 1 branch.
Cool, and I think that leaves Nimbus. I don't know if anyone from Nimbus is on the call. Oh, Dustin, hey.
Sure. Yeah, we haven't looked at this in totality, let's say, in terms of DevNet 1 readiness in a lot of detail. That said, I mean, I didn't see anything too alarming in it. But what I would certainly echo is I would want the tests, the consensus spec tests in place. But aside from that.
Okay, cool. Right, so specs are on the way, hopefully in the next couple days, and then it sounds like people are thinking small number of weeks for DevNet 1, so that's super cool.
I think for DevNet 1, EL implementing 7702 would be sort of the key milestone that would need to be achieved.
Sorry, what was that? I missed that.
I think for DevNet 1, we want 7702 on the EL side, right?
Yes, this is the account abstraction one. I don't know if we landed on that being in.
Yeah, we did. That was the main
Okay.
change between 0 and 1. And I think Red said they weren't ready with it yet, but potentially next week. And Bezu said they'd have it this week. We haven't gotten updates from the other EL teams yet, but we will follow up, and you can keep an eye out in the interop channel.
Cool. Okay. So it sounds like we have a pretty good plan for DevNet 1. Anything else there? Otherwise, I think we'll move to PeerDAS. Cool. So, right, PeerDAS. So I kind of just wanted to reiterate the thinking around having the separate activation epoch to kick us off. The way I was looking at it is that basically there would be this separate epoch to activate the feature set. And the idea is that, we could theoretically imagine having Pectra ship with some delayed PeerDAS within sort of the same fork as Pectra. That sounds really complicated, and I really don't think we should, like, if we think PeerDAS is ready to do that, then we should just ship it with the fork, right? So I think the plan was generally to say, okay, either this activation epoch will be equal to Pectra or it won't be, meaning it would be delayed until like the next hard fork. That then means that it gives us room to implement PeerDAS as part of Pectra, sort of on top of Pectra. And then what do we gain? Well, we gain not having to like have this separate hard fork with all of the code infrastructure to implement that as we go and sort of develop these things in parallel. So that at least is how I was thinking about it. I don't know if anyone has had time since the last CL call to like think about this some more, or if there are any issues kind of with that approach. But that's how I was seeing it. Barnabas says, developing in parallel doesn't sound like a thing if it's built on top of Pectra. Why not?
I think in the PeerDAS breakout call, we decided that we will continue doing Devnet 1 of PeerDAS on top of Deneb. And at a much later state, we'll basically see whether we want to rebase it on top of Electra. But I think the plan for now is to just continue doing DevNets on top of Deneb.
We had a agreement on like how this fork should actually be activated though, and every team seemed to have a different opinion on this. So it would be very good to make an actual decision. Whether it's going to be a hard fork or whether it's going to be a CL only fork, basically.
I think on this, following the discussion that has happened on R&D Discord, basically it doesn't matter whether it's hard fork or not, or if it's fork activation epoch, as long as the fork version doesn't change. So for now, clients may implement it any way they want if they can sort of guarantee that PeerDAS fork version is same as whatever was on the previous fork. So basically, I think we are following the approach of activation epoch only. But yeah, the clients who still want to use their hard fork machinery can do so by keeping the fork version same.
So did you say, well, I don't see much of a point in building it on top of Deneb though. You said that's what, like, I don't know yet. Yeah, but there's no plans as far as I can tell to push PeerDAS before Electra.
Yeah, what was the rationale there? I couldn't make the breakout.
I guess it's just because they don't want to be following the spec changes of Electra, having more stable spec that they can focus on PeerDAS, and when Electra spec solidifies more, then they can rebase on top of Electra. That's my impression.
Yeah, so PeerDAS is pretty much orthogonal to Electra, and I don't think basically rebasing on top of Electra is going to be a challenge at any given point. But yeah, so rather than spending time on the cycles now and sort of getting entangled in the Electra development, I think we can keep PeerDAS sort of orthogonal from Electra as of now.
Kind of mirroring that point from testing as well. For example, if we do merge the two branches and we're testing PeerDAS specifically, and there's a bug in Pectra, we might actually trigger the bug purely because the branches are changed, and we're going to have to spend cycles figuring out if it was a Pectra bug or if it was a PeerDAS bug, as opposed to if it was starting from Deneb, then at least then we know with more certainty that's a PeerDAS bug.
Right. Okay. I mean, yeah, it sounds like the trade-off here is like either we have like sort of more upfront development complexity by putting it on top of Pectra, or yeah, we can kind of focus more exclusively on PeerDAS by leaving it on top of Deneb, with the implication being that sometime down the road we will have to rebase on top of Pectra. that sounds okay to me for now. I mean, yeah, I guess the tricky thing would be if we're like 6 months from now and we're still on top of the nub, and then it's like, okay, are we going to ship this or not? But also, it doesn't seem like that's a huge issue.
Maybe DevNet 5 onwards, we can sort of rebase on top of Pectra, DevNet 5 of Pectra. I am assuming the DevNets will go till DevNet 10.
Okay, why 5?
Why 10?
Yeah, I don't know if we can put numbers to it, but
I mean, just from the past experience, that the amount of testing cycles that we give to a particular fork, and assuming Pectra has so much stuff going in, so just a hunch.
Maybe a good time is to say, once we are sure what's going in Pectra and we sort of have a feeling that things are stabilizing, that's when we can talk about when the fork is going to be shipped and when we start merging stuff.
yeah. I mean, if everyone thinks it's simpler, I think that sounds like a good path forward for now. Just having PeerDAS on top of Deneb, and then maybe even as soon as like a month or two from now, we can revisit the rebase.
How are the client teams feeling about PeerDAS, by the way? PeerDAS Devnet 1. When could we launch that? And would we need any spec change, or is everyone happy to keep all the same flags as it is set right now?
For DevNet 1, what are we planning to test? Is it the same stuff?
Yep, I guess so. There hasn't been many PeerDAS PRs to the consensus spec as far as I can see.
Okay, yeah. I think it should be good on our end. So we would definitely like to test reconstruction in general to see how it works across the network.
Always.
Yeah, I would suggest to think about PeerDAS Devnet 1 when we have a quite stable network which doesn't split in kurtosis setup. So I think it's still not there, or there is some kurtosis config that has like 3 or 4 clients that can keep on the same chain for a long time. What is the current state of PeerDAS? Can somebody comment on that? Because in the interop, we ended up with a network that was splitted to, I mean, every client was on sound fork, as far as I remember.
I think in my assessment, nodes need to make sure that they are consistently custodying the data columns that they are supposed to, even if they restart. And that was sort of one of the big reasons. Basically, Lodestar was not able to sync DevNet 0. I mean, it was able to sync for a few epochs, but then it would hit into this particular problem that that the columns, the nodes that should be custodying, they didn't have it, and so most likely it could also be the reason for the split. Otherwise, I don't really see. I mean, the fork choice was simple, that it is the availability was same as that we have on Blob. So ideally, there should not be any other reason for the fork split in the nodes. But I think this could be the reason for it. And if sort of we can make sure and have the stability around this, then I think we should be ready for DevNet 1.
Yeah, but we can test that in kurtosis. I mean, it should be possible to make a kurtosis config that that has a few clients with the issues that you mentioned fixed, and if the network is stable there, then I think we can think about then DevNet 1 PeerDAS. That's my opinion.
So in interop, I think the DevNet images that were running, they were old images, which is why clients split. So we had a few bugs on our end that we fixed, but it wasn't deployed to DevNet 2. But yeah, before DevNet 1, we can run a kurtosis setup with all the clients to see how it works.
The client teams just put their latest branch, their PeerDAS branch in interop. So we have a good idea of like which branches we should be using on DevNet 1 and on kurtosis tests as well. And what is the status on PeerDAS with Lodestar, because they didn't participate in the previous DevNet? Do they have something ready?
Yeah, I'll share.
Okay, so is it worth thinking about timelines for PeerDAS DevNet 1 then? Like, do we want to try to say, okay, aim for something in like a month, just to give people like sort of a deadline to work towards?
Not that I want to accelerate things, but it seemed like people felt like 2 weeks as a gut feeling was all right. Could go 3 if you want to give more time or whatever. I mean, a month it should certainly be fine, but depends on how fast we want to go.
I mean, yeah, sooner's better, but I'm
But
not sure where people are at.
I think most people felt like 2 weeks didn't seem crazy, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, 2 weeks, end of the month. I mean, that sounds fine.
Okay, so let's aim for that, and then yeah, we can run a DevNet, and I think that'll give us a lot more clarity on the next steps. Sound good to everyone?
One more suggestion I would like to do is maybe Barnabas or someone else from DevOps teams could or maybe this already done, could find at least 2 peers of clients that interops correctly. So this would help for the rest of the teams to to take these reference to clients and interop with those 2 clients that almost sure that are correctly working. So maybe it's already known that there are 2 clients that interop very stably. Is it the case, or it's unknown that there are 2 pairs
We
interoping
haven't
very
been
stably?
testing lately because there has been just heavy
Okay.
development. So as
I
soon
see.
as at least one of the clients say that their branch is ready to go, then we can start testing. But without anyone saying that they are ready, there is no point.
Yeah, but it's kind of chicken egg because, for example, for us, we really would like to have 2 clients working together so we can join it, and it could be that the other teams feel quite similar, or at least some teams.
Does Grana has a working implementation, you think?
No, I mean the idea would be if there are 2 teams that are quite confident that they are quite done with PeerDAS. I mean, given that it's still early stage, but that they believe that they should have everything to interop, then let's get these 2 teams to make a kurtosis setup that is very stable. So the rest of them could join. That would be my proposal. But do we have these teams that are very confident about their PeerDAS implementation?
So I'd have to check with Jimmy because he's been doing most of the PeerDAS work in Dapline, but I think Lighthouse has a pretty solid implementation if I'm following things correctly.
Okay, is there any is there a second one that feels similarly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Manu, go ahead.
Okay. Yep. We can say for Prism, we are quite confident about PeerDAS as well.
Okay, so Barnabas, just take Prism and Lighthouse and try to make a stable network. And if it happens, then I think soon we will have a DevNet one.
One thing I want to know that the PR regarding specifying the blob count through on the FCU params and the associated change for it on the EL block header for adding blob gas limit, that is part of Pectra, or is that part of PeerDAS? And I mean, I guess it will be part of Pectra if this is not really a fork.
Sorry, what were you asking about?
So your PR regarding adding max blobs max blobs per block to the FCU param.
Right.
So is that PR part of Pectra or is that PR part of PeerDAS?
Yeah, so that was next on the agenda. Do we feel good about Devnet 1 just in terms of development timelines? I mean, it sounds like people are on top of it. When clients are ready, we'll start testing soon. And then we can move to the blob count conversation. But do we all feel pretty good with the Devnet 1 plan for PeerDAS? Okay, I got at least one thumbs up. I got two. I'll take it. Let's see here. So, well, okay, there was actually one quick thing before we get to the blob count itself. Tim, let's see. Tim has a draft PR here for including PeerDAS into Pectra. And yeah, this kind of starts to all touch on the same thing. Tim, did you want to say a few words about this? Because I think there was some novelty around the PR and our usual EIP process.
Sure. So yeah, I had the reason I kept it as a draft is it just felt a bit like, so PeerDAS as its spec is currently a networking change and not like a core protocol change, but at the same time, it's literally the biggest feature that we have going into Pectra. So it feels like we should include it. And then, you know, the activation stuff we can add to the meta EIP later, but I guess anyone think we should not list it in the meta EIP? And if not, I'll just merge this now.
I think we should, because it just signals that we're serious about this, and we are. Okay, cool. Let me go check the agenda. Okay, yeah. So I think we kind of covered the PeerDAS things themselves, and then the next question then is like, yeah, somewhat, how do we actually ship this? Do we increase the blob count? How is it all rolled out? And all of these things. So Gajendra was just talking about a PR I had to suggest a way to have the CL drive the blob count. I don't know if you both had a chance to look at it, but the motivation was essentially to uncouple, like, so right now there's basically a hard-coded constant both on CL and EL for the blob count. This couples together the layers, and so it kind of makes things a little less flexible in terms of us having these like shipping timeline discussions and, you know, fork scoping and all of this. So it would be kind of nice if we can uncouple them. You could then theoretically have like a CL only fork where, you know, if we want to change the blob count independently, we wouldn't need to update all of the execution clients, but just the CL clients. So I think there's a good reason, you know, there's good motivation for doing this. And the question is just how would you do it? The suggestion that I have in the PR right now is basically just to send it over with every payload. So whether you're like validating a payload or building a payload, the CL would just send it as part of the parameters that already exist to tell the EL, hey, for this block, there can only be this many blobs. The catch here now is that this kind of breaks optimistic sync because the EL can be in regimes where it basically can't talk to the CL synchronously like this, and then it might not know what the blob count should be. So yeah, the question then is like, what do we do about this? And yeah, I think Gajender, maybe Terrence, there was some conversation on the Discord around this, but the suggestion was basically to actually include the blob count in some representation in the EL header, which does, I think, nicely solve all these issues. Yeah. Has anyone had a chance to look at this PR or think any more about this?
I mean, I think not knowing whether it's valid for optimistic sync isn't a problem per se. Like you can simply accept like whatever you're told it is, and then like verify it once you get the beacon block. I think the only problem is that you need to know everything in order to be able to compute the blob gas. Like I think that is the problem with that approach. So as long as you can do that, I think like it doesn't matter. Like you don't have to care about optimistic sync.
Right, but then you like that suggesting that it does have to go in the header, which is, I think, at least it's a different type of change, which is fine. But that just needs to be something that then all the execution clients need to be on board with.
Yeah, I tried to think about that as well, and it is like a conundrum how to do that part. I mean, the optimal way would be to change the computation. I think it's probably a mistake that blob, like the gas price computation, happens in the EL. Like that should have been in the CL. But yeah, that's more difficult to change now, I guess.
We could, but I think you then have the same issue, right? It's just more about communicating the information at the right time, and the blob count and the blob gas are kind of the same thing.
I mean, one thing you have to remember as well is if you actually want to change the blob count, there is a computation that has to happen to update the excess gas as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I guess that works automatically if you do. Yeah, maybe the easiest is that what you suggest. Yeah, like adding the blob count would solve that, because then you can just keep track of the excess gas. Except that the unit changes, right? Because like when you have more blobs, the constant you want to divide by changes. This is actually like, yeah, this is not easy. This is why it would be easier to have it in the CL, because then it would be part of the fork. Like in the fork, you would just recompute all the constants. Whereas if you have it in the EL, then there's like some weird backward math to figure out what the right excess gas and what the right EIP 1559 divisor is.
And this is just at the fork boundary when we changed the blob count? Is that what you're referring to?
So there's basically right now, right, the gas cost is computed as like an exponential of like the excess gas divided by this blob gas fee constant. I can't remember what it's called. And whenever you change the number of blobs, you have to adjust both of these numbers as well, because they will be like first the constant changes, but that at the same time means that the old excess gas is no longer in the right units either, because it was measured in terms of the old constant essentially.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So
okay.
the more the better way would be, if there is an easy way, I'll have a look at this later. If there is a way to transform the whole thing so that all the gas computations happen in the CL, then this is actually more elegant, because then it's just part of the fork boundary, right? Which we'll have anyway, as far as I understand. For if we have like a blob chain, where in the EL there's actually no such thing, because for the EL we want it not to be a fork. Yeah, so this could be easier. Otherwise, we can figure out another way in which the CL messages the EL about the change in those constants. But it does need to be.
Right. Oscar?
Yeah, just to mention, if we want to keep it in the EL, then one way to get rid of that annoying discontinuity, where basically you need or this annoying thing where you basically need to make an update to that excess gas at the fork point. You can basically just accept that you will have a discontinuity in the base fee. So basically, if you say you double the blob count, then basically your base fee would have, but it's like a 5 to 10 minute period until you're just for a few minutes you basically have cheaper blobs, and then you're back to the same price. These adjustments are very quick. And it's a little inelegant, but that would turn those constants back into pure functions from the current blob count. So that if you communicate the current blob count, then you can compute this adjustment ratio. You just cannot compute you just can't detect that. You would have to do this one-time update to the excess gas.
The constant, like the one in the exponential. But I assume you just want to make that a function of the blob count.
Yeah, exactly. That one can be a function of the blob count, because you don't have to detect the fork itself. It's just basically always some constant ratio.
Right. That's probably the simplest solution. The question is it the most, like, the smallest? Is it the most elegant solution, I guess?
Okay, so there's two things here. Like, we kind of started talking about just how to communicate this generally if we took the data away from the EL and then having to go from CL back to the EL. And then also now we're talking about, if we do actually change the blob count, there's going to be this discontinuity with how we compute the actual blob base fee, and that needs some thought as well. So yeah, what I'm hearing is that this is not that simple to change. But I do think it's worth changing. So yeah, I would suggest people take a look at the PR. And then, yeah, this has all been good discussion. And from there, we can try to figure out another path forward. If anyone wants to take another look at, maybe even a more invasive change to move more of the computations of things into the CL, that would be great. And I think we'll just kind of keep turning on this. Cool. So, yeah, I think we've kind of covered a number of the PeerDAS things on the agenda that I had here. The other big thing is just actually do we raise the blob count and how and all of this? Is this a conversation anyone is keen to have now? The intent is to raise the blob count in Pectra. Obviously, the question is how much, and is it coupled with PeerDAS? Is PeerDAS coupled with Pectra? Like, I think there's a lot of uncertainty here still. But yeah, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or updates on this we're sharing right now. Yeah, Tony had a comment here. We also want to be mindful of the worst case block size if we do raise the blob count, and this calls up EIP 7623, I believe is the number. That's more of an execution layer change, but also worth calling out here. Otherwise, yeah, from the data I've seen, honestly, it looks like even already weaker nodes in the network are having issues with the current blob parameters. I had a document where I was talking about the uncoupling of the CL and EL with respect to blob count that we were just discussing. I also suggested another feature essentially where you could like customize your local blob building to help with this issue. I think these are all things we want to keep in mind as we move forward. And yeah, I think otherwise, at least where I'm at right now, is just having more time to have more data and analysis around how blobs are actually going on mainnet. It seems a little bit early to me to say, oh yeah, we definitely want to go to like 816 or like some concrete number, especially without seeing how the PeerDAS devnets go and all of this. Ansgar?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I just wanted to briefly flag that in the chat we had a conversation quite a while, and there were some people that were under the impression that we basically specifically did not want to increase the blob count at all during Pectra, just because it would add quite a bit of testing overhead. And other people that were very adamant that we actually should really increase the blob count. So I would just want to flag it as a topic where we will at some point have to have the conversation, and neither side should fully assume yet that that decision is made either way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say if PeerDAS is ready with Pectra, then we would also raise the blob count, just because of the demand. So I think that's understood. At least hopefully it's understood.
Isn't that starting to get a bit risky though? Because we don't actually know how PeerDAS will play out on mainnet.
Sure. So then conditional on PeerDAS, right? I mean, I don't know. Like, so that does raise an intermediate step that I think Francesco was calling out in the chat just now. Like, we could imagine. Well, that's the thing. There's a couple of things. So, like, one option is we ship PeerDAS, leave the blob counts alone. Again, I think if we're confident enough in PeerDAS to ship it, then we're probably also confident enough to raise the blob count. We could also just, yeah, we could ship PeerDAS and not raise the blob count. We could just raise the blob count with 4844. I think that's probably not as preferred to everyone, but that's an option. And yeah, so there's many things to work through here. Barnabas?
Just because we are confident enough to ship PeerDAS, that's not going to give us confidence to increase the blob count, though. That's not the same thing.
I agree.
Because that's what you just said like 1 minute ago, that if we have enough confidence in shipping PeerDAS, then we have the confidence to increase the blob count as well. But those two are completely different things.
They're pretty different. I mean, I would hope we get to a place where we have confidence in both, that like one implies the other, but yes, I agree with what you're saying.
The point is we have so many IPs, and I feel like we just keep shoveling more and more and more into it. And it's just never going to end. So we have to draw some line somewhere where we say, okay, this is where we're going to end it. And I think shipping PeerDAS and increase the block count in the same in the same fork is just not something that we can do in like the next year and a half, testing wise, as well as all the other EIPs that we have included as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how valuable it is to have a fork scoping conversation today, but you know, I think if we get to that point and it becomes clear in a few months, then that motivates splitting PeerDAS into a different fork, or yeah, rethinking Pectra. Francesco?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out something which I think Ansgar already mentioned in the chat, that like the block count means something quite different with PeerDAS. So I mean, this doesn't mean that necessarily we can feel confident having, I don't know, like 6 or 8 or whatever like target, but it does mean that we can't really just say, you know, we are okay with a block count of 3 because we know we've seen it on mainnet. Like it means something different in PeerDAS. Like it's the throughput that I mean the bandwidth that you need to handle 3.6 is very different. In PeerDAS it would be like much less. So yeah, I don't think that necessarily it seems a bit of like a bias there of like, you know, we ship PeerDAS without doing any change to the block count, then we can feel confident that it works. But that's not really, to me, that's not really necessarily the case. This doesn't mean that like
necessarily we should increase it, but I think that's one thing to keep in mind. And also another thing is, I think if we're not willing to do that, which I can understand, I agree there's a ton of EIPs and things going on, and it's hard to test all of it. But if we're not willing to do that, what benefit are we actually getting from doing PeerDAS with Pectra if that ends up being the case? Like at that point, does it not just make more sense to de-risk the whole thing, just do Pectra without PeerDAS, just do commit to doing PeerDAS as its own fork, like much before Verkle? Because I think the only really like stupid outcome that we should avoid at all costs is trying to like tie PeerDAS and with a blob count decrease to like some fork far away in the future. Like that's like really the only outcome that's just like to me unacceptable. But other than that, like whether we do PeerDAS in January or like April or whatever, like I mean doing it earlier without blob count increase to me like just doesn't really add that much.
Right. I mean, it would give us evidence on mainnet that PeerDAS is working like we expect, right? So like it does actually de-risk shipping PeerDAS.
But it also increases risk to everything else and like to the whole fork.
Well, I think that's a different conversation. And that's where this starts to get tricky is, yeah, like aligning Pectra timelines with PeerDAS timelines with Blob increased timelines. Parash?
Yeah, so the one point I do want to bring up is like we're talking about testing, but the issue is that testing networking is extremely hard. We did do a lot of 4844 related testing, but the way blobs played out on mainnet is not a one-to-one analog to how it played out in testing. We do see weaker nodes having issues. We do see timing games being played and stuff like that. And that's the main reason why, even if we can simulate a perfect world in which PeerDAS along with the blob increase does work in all of our devnets, it doesn't actually mean anything for mainnet. And that's my main argument for why we should probably do things step by step rather than all at once, because just testing doesn't mean anything here.
Ansgar, did you have your hand up for?
Yeah, I just wanted to.
comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly say that to me, really, like this point that underscore is super important. That like the meaning of blobs already changes under PeerDAS. So I don't even think it makes sense with PeerDAS to call it a blob count increase, because we have to pick a new number of blobs for PeerDAS anyway. Even if we happen to go with this kind of 3.6 that we also have today, that doesn't mean we can actually reuse anything. I mean, maybe like a tiny sliver of EL side logic around the gas computation, but that's the easiest part. Anything else changes anyway. And then I don't know specifically why mainnet might break under, say, I don't know, 8.16 or something, but it would not break under 3.6. It could also break under 3.6. And so the only world in which I see that there's any reason to stick to as a default to the values we happen to have in a pre-PeerDAS world would be if we ship PeerDAS with some sort of fallback mechanism to disable it if there are issues and fall back to the existing version. But that seems so incredibly complex, including for fork choice implications, that I don't think it's realistic to ship it that way. So if we already ship it as its own standalone thing that has to not break, otherwise mainnet breaks, then I don't see why 3.6 would have any more value as a default than any other count number we could. I just don't think calling it an increase makes sense when we have to pick a completely new number anyway for P.
Actually, Francesco, I think, said something earlier that made a lot of sense. If we are moving to a paradigm in which the CL is setting the blobs, we could potentially increase the blob count. And we already have this mechanism with the circuit breaker, where if we see a bunch of missed slots in a row / non-finality / a lot of other circuit breaker conditions that we use for MEV, we could reuse that same circuit breaker conditions for blobs as well.
I think that isn't, I don't think we can do that here because all the clients have to be consensus on the maximum blob amount, and like the circuit breaker rules are not something that all clients have consensus on. And I don't think they could either, because what they see can be different.
But you could, for example, just locally say like, I'm not going to propose a block with more than, I don't know, 2 blobs or something if I see that things are not working. I don't know how viable it is, but and I mean, if someone else does propose a block with a lot of blobs, and it turns out that um, like that the network is not able to handle that, I guess that you just get reorged.
Yeah, I guess, but if you see a block with 3 blobs and your node is feeling like the network's in bad shape and only 2 need to, like, we should only ship with 2 or something like that, then you have to reject that block. And then what if the rest of the network, like, I don't know, that seems, can you really do that? Unless we have special rules where it doesn't actually make the block invalid to have more blobs than you expect, but that's weird. But I don't know, just want to say a second what Ansgar was saying. Like, if we have to pick a number, what if we even just picked a small blob size increase? I mean, if we're going to test with 6 with PeerDAS, we might as well test with 8 and then leave it to some future date to increase it further. That seems like a safe option and a small increase.
What's the point of increasing if it's not significant? Like, why risk of increasing if there's no actual benefit?
I think this is Francesco's point where it's not that we're not increasing from a known value if we're implementing PeerDAS. We are just like kind of picking a number that we think is right. And like, yeah, lower is maybe safer. If we imagine there are going to be bottlenecks with upload download, but it's not necessarily like we don't know anything about the new limits.
Also, 8 is the power of 2, just saying.
So we can target the same amount of bandwidth, right? Like, we can do that calculation, and we can know that with PeerDAS, the blob count might change, but it's going to be the same amount of bandwidth. So that's like a good starting point. Yeah, Francesco?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how meaningful this is, but just to give everyone like a very, very rough idea with the current parameters in the spec, for a validator, you would be using basically, like if you're like a really low power validator that's running like 1 or 2 or like a few, then you would be using roughly like 8x less bandwidth for the same amount of data. So, maybe we don't increase the block count by 8x, but like maybe it's safer to increase it by 2x or something like that. And as a full node, it would be even less. Like you'll be using 1/16. I mean, of course, we should like actually confirm these numbers on test nets, like compare, for the same amount of blobs, what is the bandwidth usage for A44 versus PeerDAS, but in principle, that's what it should be.
Right. So, seems like there's plenty of headroom to argue for a double. But yeah, I don't know. I think, at least I would hope we're going to have a better understanding of how this stuff works, once we have devnets that are running and PeerDAS is actually live, and then hopefully the conversation is a little less uncertain.
And I guess sorry, I didn't mean to jump, but I just want to say, like, if the problem is that we're putting too much in the fork, like, I just think the blob increase and PeerDAS are something coupled. Like, changing the blob size by a little bit compared to the other things that we're putting in this fork is such a small change if you already assume that PeerDAS is going in. If we have to pull things from the fork, I don't think a configuration where Pectra ships or where PeerDAS ships and the increase doesn't ship makes sense. I think we would pull something else.
Enrico, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a comment, because we are saying that if we are going to with the PeerDAS activation epoch in Electra, it means that PeerDAS will activate later. So it's weird that we get a blob increase and then the the PeerDAS activates just later. So picking up the right blobs count at fork seems like weird to me, unless we increase the blobs at PeerDAS activation, which is a different story. So we end up not increasing enough because we have to cover the first month of non-PeerDAS activation, and we don't get the full benefit of the right number of blobs that we can support in PeerDAS, which is weird.
Right, and you're just referring to having like some delayed activation of PeerDAS.
Yes,
Yeah, I mean,
the moment of, if we agree on the delayed activation of the PeerDAS.
Yeah, I don't see why we would ever do that myself, because it just seems to complicate what's already very, very complicated. I think we either ship PeerDAS with Pectra or we don't, basically. Because otherwise, yeah, it's just going to add even more sort of huge decision points on top of something that's already quite complex. Yeah, Dankred?
In terms of the blob count, I think it's also not crazy to think about what if we just do the same as with call data and make validators just vote on it. I mean, it's working. There's no crazy increases, and it allows us to change it without a hard fork. Because I think largely, in the end, like the way it's always worked with the gas limit is that the miners and now the stakers just like listen to the core devs what they think is a safe limit and then increase it to that. So this would allow us more flexibility in the future.
Right. I mean, do we ever think we're in a situation where, you know, people on this call, for example, want to raise the blob count, but then the validators, let's say, aren't listening? Not because they don't want to, but just because, you know, they don't understand how to like go and change target limits and all this stuff. Okay. So yeah, I think we just keep charging ahead here. I again hope that having PeerDAS testnets will give some certainty to, or at least some insight into some of these things, and hopefully we can well, I mean, we will figure something out, so we just have to keep pushing ahead. Is there anything else on PeerDAS or blob counts or anything like that? Otherwise, we have an SSC update. Okay. Eton, I think you're driving this. Would you like to give an overview of the latest there?
Sure. So progress has been going well. Teku has joined the SSC 7688 Devnet as well. That's the CL one with the stable containers for all the data structures in consensus that keep changing across forks. Last time, Grandine mentioned some questions about type systems. I'm not sure if those are resolved. Otherwise, I think we can just give it a brief discussion.
Yeah, so for us, we think that we will go with the approach where we will try to keep the types that we have, the type system in general that we already have in the application, and we'll just try to build something like meta structures or so that would accommodate functionality required for stable containers. So that's the current plan for us. But the implementation we have, it's not finished, and I think we will tell more after it's done.
Do you see any blockers? Like same goes for Lighthouse and Prism. Like, is there something that we should know about?
At the moment, for Grandina, we don't see blockers, but you know, as the Rust environment is quite restrictive and not too flexible. I think until we finished, we cannot fully confirm you that there will not be any blockers. But so far we are progressing.
Okay, and from Lighthouse, I see in the chat that there is also no blocker so far.
No.
Prism, I think Casey made some comments on the spec as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're still looking into it. We should have an update by the next ACD.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we should target the next ACDC. It seems that everyone started implementing it and that we could resolve the questions there. And it would be really great if we can have the full Devnet with all the clients so that we can decide if we want this in Pectra or not. For Remarkable, the implementation in Python that we use in consensus specs, I have pushed that one to production quality, but I'm still trying to get hold of Proto Lambda. It's a bit hard to reach. If anyone could ping him about this PR that I just put in the chat, would be great. Just because we need that in consensus specs to do any tests, right? And also a small update on the SSC transactions. Ethereum.js has started working on that one, and Nimbus has a corresponding consensus client. One question that came up is that right now in the CL, we need to know about all the fields in the EL block header. So every time that there is a new field in the EL block header, the CL execution payload header and the the CL execution payload have to be updated in lockstep. And one thing that happens if we go with the SSC transactions in the same way is that the CL also needs to know how to hash the transactions in order to do, the optimistic sync, and also in order to have the transaction type as part of the execution payload. So that would be a small restriction for the EL, because right now they can introduce new transaction types unilaterally without a CL fork. But with that, it would mean that whenever there are new fields in the transaction, that the CL also needs to be updated at the same time. The same way how it's already done for the EL block header. I'm wondering if that is fine. The alternative that I'm seeing is just to make two trees, one with the serialized transactions, like the same how we do it today, and then a second tree with the transaction IDs in a list, like all the hash tree roots in a list. But that would mean like that we essentially double the amount of hashes that are needed. And I mean, most of the block is transactions, so a bit suboptimal. So yeah, just wanted to point it out that whether that's someone sees a problem with the CL knowing how to Merkleize transactions and what fields there are.
Yeah, I don't think there are really any issues. It's just, yeah, it opens a lot of sort of feature set things to consider. Yeah. But thanks for the update. PeerDAS, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I have a horrible connection. I don't know how much is on cutting off, but I think we should probably revisit or evaluate whether or not we can remove completely the execution payload header. For currently, there's no in-protocol usage of it. We only check the block hash. We check against the parent hash. In my EPBS branch, I have it essentially with minimal data, removed most of it. I understand that there are some concerns about light clients, but light clients currently don't really use the header, and they can probably use it, check it on the EL side. I think we should probably think about removing all of this information on the execution payload header that we're not using, and that would solve also Ethan's problem.
The light client stuff should still be fine. Like a full node that serves that data, it can still inspect the block and construct it, right? It's just that
exactly. So and we are not using at all the execution payload header. We can only we can replace the last execution payload header in the beacon state by just the last block hash.
Yeah, in the beacon state, yeah. In the builder API, it's still relevant, of course. But that one is not on chain, right? But it's a good point. Like maybe we can go the other way and make the execution payload opaque as well, and then the EL would be the one to.
Yeah, that makes the life of us of everyone much better. There are some things that we need anyways. Even in the builder API, you need the KCG commitments and a bunch of things, but it can be reduced quite a bit.
Yeah, we can think about that once we have an implementation. Luckily, it's quite orthogonal. So the SSC transaction, it can be implemented on an EL, and then we can figure out how we want to, like whether we want to add the transaction as well to the CL or whether we want to remove the execution payload. Yeah, could you send me that branch as well, like the EPBS branch from the chat? Would be cool as well. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's the SSC update for this time. Goal is next ACDC to have the full DevNet with Grandine, Prism, and Lighthouse as well. Then we can decide whether to include it. And yeah, if someone can poke Proto Lambda about the remarkable PR. Yeah, that's all from my side.
Is this a Pectra DevNet or Deneb or something else?
It's an Electra DevNet. It's on stabilitynow.box. The Cortosis config is there.
Cool. Nice work. So we only have a few minutes here at the end of the call, and we did have one more thing on the agenda to talk about the name for the F star. I think there have been a couple different suggestions flying around. Sounds like we have some leading favorites, either Fulu or Felis. I don't know if people want to discuss now. I think there's also, I'll go find a link, but I think there's an ETH Magicians post for it. Does anybody want to champion their favorite?
Is there a name for the EL side?
Osaka.
So it's kind of between like Frosaka or Fisaka for the combination.
Fusaka, Felsaka. Pari suggested a Sulu, which I kind of like. Oh yeah, Fosaka. Okay, well, I would suggest going to the Seed Magician's post if you feel strongly, and otherwise, if there anything else on the F star name, it doesn't sound like there's enough demand to make a decision right now. Okay. Anything else to wrap up the call? Otherwise, I think that is it for the day. Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everyone, and see you on the next call.
Thanks, Alex.
Bye-bye.
Bye.